An Evening in Uncle Tom's Cabin Chapter 4. The cabin of Uncle Tom was a small log building, close adjoining to the house, as the Negro par excellence designates his master's dwelling. In front it had a neat garden patch, where, every summer, strawberries, raspberries, and a variety of fruits and vegetables, flourished under careful tending. The whole front of it was covered by a large scarlet bignonia and a native multi-flower rose, which, entwisting and interlacing, left scarce a vestige of the rough logs to be seen. Here, also, in summer, various brilliant annuals, such as marigolds, petunias, 4 o'clocks, found an indulgent corner in which to unfold their splendors, and were the delight and pride of Aunt Chloe's heart. Let us enter the dwelling. The evening meal at the house is over, and Aunt Chloe, who presided over its preparation as head cook, has left to inferior officers in the kitchen the business of clearing away and washing dishes, and come out into her own snug territories, to get her old man's supper. Therefore, doubt not that it is her you see by the fire, presiding with anxious interest over certain frizzling items in a stew pan, and anon with grave consideration lifting the cover of a bake kettle, from whence steam forth indubitable intimations of something good. A round, black, shining face is hers, so glossy as to suggest the idea that she might have been washed over with white of eggs, like one of her own tea rusks. Her whole plump countenance beams with satisfaction and contentment from under her well-starched check turban, bearing on it, however, if we must confess it, a little of that tinge of self-consciousness which becomes the first cook of the neighborhood, as Aunt Chloe was universally held and acknowledged to be. A cook she certainly was, in the very bone and center of her soul. Not a chicken or turkey or duck in the barnyard but looked grave when they saw her approaching, and seemed evidently to be reflecting on their latter end, and certain it was that she was always meditating on trussing, stuffing, and roasting, to a degree that was calculated to inspire terror in any reflecting fowl living. Her corn cake, in all its varieties of hoe cake, dodgers, muffins, and other species too numerous to mention, was a sublime mystery to all less practiced compounders, and she would shake her fat sides with honest pride and merriment, as she would narrate the fruitless efforts that one and another of her compeers had made to attain to her elevation. The arrival of company at the house, the arranging of dinners and suppers in style, awoke all the energies of her soul, and no sight was more welcome to her than a pile of traveling trunks launched on the veranda, for then she foresaw fresh efforts and fresh triumphs. Just at present, however, Aunt Chloe is looking into the bake pan, in which congenial operation we shall leave her till we finish our picture of the cottage. In one corner of it stood a bed, covered neatly with a snowy spread, and by the side of it was a piece of carpeting, of some considerable size. On this piece of carpeting Aunt Chloe took her stand, as being decidedly in the upper walks of life, and it and the bed by which it lay, and the whole corner, in fact, were treated with distinguished consideration, and made, so far as possible, sacred from the marauding inroads and desecrations of little folks. In fact, that corner was the drawing room of the establishment. In the other corner was a bed of much humbler pretensions, and evidently designed for use. The wall over the fireplace was adorned with some very brilliant scriptural prints, and a portrait of General Washington, drawn and colored in a manner which would certainly have astonished that hero, if ever he had happened to meet with its like. On a rough bench in the corner, a couple of woolly-headed boys, with glistening black eyes and fat shining cheeks, were busy in superintending the first walking operations of the baby, which, as is usually the case, consisted in getting up on its feet, balancing a moment, and then tumbling down, each successive failure being violently cheered, as something decidedly clever. A table, somewhat rheumatic in its limbs, was drawn out in front of the fire, and covered with a cloth, displaying cups and saucers of a decidedly brilliant pattern, with other symptoms of an approaching meal. At this table was seated Uncle Tom, Mr. Shelby's best hand, who, as he is to be the hero of our story, we must daguerreotype for our readers. He was a large, broad-chested, powerfully made man, of a full glossy black, and a face whose truly African features were characterized by an expression of grave and steady good sense, united with much kindliness and benevolence. There was something about his whole air self-respecting and dignified, yet united with a confiding and humble simplicity. He was very busily intent at this moment on a slate lying before him, on which he was carefully and slowly endeavoring to accomplish a copy of some letters, in which operation he was overlooked by young Moss R. George, a smart, bright boy of 13, who appeared fully to realize the dignity of his position as instructor. "Not that way, Uncle Tom, not that way," said he, briskly, as Uncle Tom laboriously brought up the tail of his G the wrong side out. "That makes a Q, you see." "Law sakes, now, does it?" said Uncle Tom, looking with a respectful, admiring air, as his young teacher flourishingly scrawled Q's and G's innumerable for his edification, and then, taking the pencil in his big, heavy fingers, he patiently recommenced. "How easy white folks us does things," said Aunt Chloe, pausing while she was greasing a griddle with a scrap of bacon on her fork, and regarding young Master George with pride. "The way he can write, now, and read, too, and then to come out here evenings and read his lessons to us, it's mighty interesting." "But, Aunt Chloe, I'm getting mighty hungry," said George. "Isn't that cake in the skillet almost done?" "Most done, Moss R. George," said Aunt Chloe, lifting the lid and peeping in, browning beautiful, a real lovely brown. Let me alone for dat, Mrs. Let Sally try to make some cake, other day, just to larn her," she said. "Oh, go way, Mrs., said I, "it really hurts my feelings, now, to see good victuals spiled dat our way. Cake ris all to one side, no shape at all, no more than my shoe, go way." And with this final expression of contempt for Sally's greenness, Aunt Chloe whipped the cover off the bake kettle, and disclosed to view a neatly baked pound cake, of which no city confectioner need to have been ashamed. This being evidently the central point of the entertainment, Aunt Chloe began now to bustle about earnestly in the supper department. "Here you, Mose and Pete, get out the way, you niggers. Get away, Polly, honey, Mammy'll give her baby some of it, by and by. Now, Moss R. George, you just take off dem books, and set down now with my old man, and I'll take up the sausages, and have the first griddle full of cakes on your plates in less than no time." "They wanted me to come to supper in the house," said George, "but I knew what was what too well for that, Aunt Chloe." So you did, honey," said Aunt Chloe, heaping the smoking batter cakes on his plate. "You knowed your old aunt'd keep the best for you." "Oh, let you alone for dat. Go way." And, with that, Auntie gave George a nudge with her finger, designed to be immensely facetious, and turned again to her griddle with great briskness. "Now for the cake," said Moss R. George, when the activity of the griddle department had somewhat subsided, and, with that, the youngster flourished a large knife over the article in question. "Law bless you, Moss R. George," said Aunt Chloe, with earnestness, catching his arm, "you wouldn't be for cutting it with dat ar great heavy knife. Smash all down, spile all the pretty rise of it. Here, I've got a thin old knife, I keeps sharp a purpose. Dar now, see. Comes apart light as a feather. Now eat away, you won't get anything to beat dat ar. Tom Lincoln says," said George, speaking with his mouth full, "that their Ginny is a better cook than you." "Dem Lincolns ain't much count, no way," said Aunt Chloe, contemptuously. "I mean," said alongside our folks. "They spectable folks enough in a kinder plain way, but, as to getting up anything in style, they don't begin to have a notion on said Moss R. Lincoln, now, alongside Moss R. Shelby. Good Lord. And Mrs. Lincoln, can she kinder sweep it into a room like my missus, so kinder splendid, you know. Oh, go way. Don't tell me nothing of dem Lincolns." And Aunt Chloe tossed her head as one who hoped she did know something of the world. "Well, though, I've heard you say," said George, "that Ginny was a pretty fair cook." So I did, said Aunt Chloe. I may say dat good, plain, common cookin', Jenny'll do, make a good pone o' bread bile her taters for her corn cakes isn't extra, not extra now, Jenny's corn cakes isn't, but then they's far but, lor, come to the higher branches, and what can she do? Why, she makes pie sartin she does, but what kinder crust? Can she make your real flecky paste, as melts in your mouth, and lies all up like a puff? Now, I went over there when Miss Mary was gwine to be married, and Jenny she just showed me the weddin' pies. Jenny and I is good friends, ya know. I never said nothin', but go long, Moss or George. Why, I shouldn't sleep a wink for a week, if I had a batch of pies like dem are. Why, they want tea no count tea all. I suppose Jenny thought they were ever so nice, said George. Thought so, didn't she? Dar she was, showing as innocent. Yes, see, it's just here, Jenny don't know. Lord, the family and nothing. She can't be expected to know. Ta and tea no fault o' hern. Ah, Moss or George, you doesn't know half your privileges in your family and bringin' up. Here Aunt Chloe sighed, and rolled up her eyes with emotion. I'm sure, Aunt Chloe, I understand all my pie and pudding privileges, said George. Ask Tom Lincoln if I don't crow over him, every time I meet him. Aunt Chloe sat back in her chair, and indulged in a hearty guffaw of laughter, at this witticism of young Moss R.S., laughing till the tears rolled down her black, shining cheeks, and varying the exercise with playfully slapping and poking Moss R. Georgie, and telling him to go away, and that he was a case that he was fit to kill her, and that he sartin would kill her, one of these days, and, between each of these sanguinary predictions, going off into a laugh, each longer and stronger than the other, till George really began to think that he was a very dangerously witty fellow, and that it became him to be careful how he talked as funny as he could. And so ye telly Tom, did ye? Oh, Lord. What young UNS will be up ter? Ye crowed over Tom? Oh, Lord. Moss or George, if ye wouldn't make a hornbug laugh. Yes, said George, I says to him, Tom, you ought to see some of Aunt Chloe's pies, they're the right sort, says I. Pity, now, Tom couldn't, said Aunt Chloe, on whose benevolent heart the idea of Tom's benighted condition seemed to make a strong impression. Yet oughter just ask him here to dinner, some o' these times, Moss or George, she added, it would look quite pretty of ye. Ye know, Moss or George, ye oop tender feel bub nobody, on count your privileges, cause all our privileges is gin to us, we ought allies to member that, said Aunt Chloe, looking quite serious. Well, I mean to ask Tom here, some day next week, said George, and you do your prettiest, Aunt Chloe, and we'll make him stare. Won't we make him eat so he won't get over it for a fortnight? Yes, Sartin, said Aunt Chloe, delighted, you'll see. Lord, to think of some of our dinners. Your mind dat they are great chicken pie I made when we guv to dinner to General Knox? I and Mrs., we come pretty near quarreling about dat they are crust. What does get into ladies sometimes, I don't know, but, sometimes, when a body has the heaviest kind o' responsibility on as ye may say, and is all kinder series and taken up, dey takes dat ar time to be hangin' round and kinder interferin'. Now, Mrs., she wanted me to do this way, and she wanted me to do dat way, and, finally, I got kinder sarcy, and, says I, now, Mrs., do just look at dem beautiful white hands o' yourn with long fingers, and all a-sparkling with rings, like my white lilies when to do s on and look at my great black stumpin' hands. Now, don't ye think dat the Lord must have meant me to make the pie crust, and you to stay in the parlor? Dar. I was just so sarcy, Moss or George. And what did mother say, said George. Say, why, she kinder larfed in her eyes dem great handsome eyes o' hern, and, says she, well, Aunt Chloe, I think you are about in the right auntie, says she, and she went off into parlor. She oughter cracked me over de head for being so sarcy, but dars war tea is I can't do nothin' with ladies in de kitchen. Well, you made out well with that dinner, I remember everybody said so, said George. Didn't I? And wanty I behind de dinin' room door dat very day? And didn't I see de general pass his plate 3 times for some more dat very pie, and, says he, you must have an uncommon cook, Mrs. Shelby. Lord, I was fit to split myself. And de general, he knows what cookin' is, said Aunt Chloe, drawing herself up with an air. Very nice man, de general. He comes of one of the very fustest families in Old Virginia. He knows what's what, now, as well as I do, de general. Yes, see, there's pints in all pies, Moss or George, but tanty everybody knows what they is, or order be. But the general, he knows, I knew by his marks he made. Yes, he knows what de pints is. By this time, Master George had arrived at that pass to which even a boy can come, under uncommon circumstances, when he really could not eat another morsel, and, therefore, he was at leisure to notice the pile of woolly heads and glistening eyes which were regarding their operations hungrily from the opposite corner. Here, you Mose, Pete, he said, breaking off liberal bits, and throwing it at them, you want some, don't you? Come, Aunt Chloe, bake them some cakes. And George and Tom moved to a comfortable seat in the chimney corner, while Aunt Chloe, after baking a goodly pile of cakes, took her baby on her lap, and began alternately filling its mouth and her own, and distributing to Mose and Pete, who seemed rather to prefer eating theirs as they rolled about on the floor under the table, tickling each other, and occasionally pulling the baby's toes. Oh, go long, will ya, said the mother, giving now and then a kick, in a kind of general way, under the table, when the movement became too obstreperous. Can't ye be decent when white folks comes to see ye? Stop dat ar, now, will ye? Better mind yourselves, or I'll take ye down a buttonhole lower, when Moss or George is gone. What meaning was couched under this terrible threat, it is difficult to say, but certain it is that its awful indistinctness seemed to produce very little impression on the young sinner's address. "La, now," said Uncle Tom, "they are so full of tickle all the while, they can't behave theirselves." Here the boys emerged from under the table, and, with hands and faces well plastered with molasses, began a vigorous kissing of the baby. "Get along wid ye," said the mother, pushing away their woolly heads. "Ye'll all stick together, and never get clar, if ye do dat fashion. Go long to de spring and wash yourselves," she said, seconding her exhortations by a slap, which resounded very formidably, but which seemed only to knock out so much more laugh from the young ones, as they tumbled precipitately over each other out of doors, where they fairly screamed with merriment. "Did ye ever see such aggravating young uns?" said Aunt Chloe, rather complacently, as, producing an old towel, kept for such emergencies, she poured a little water out of the cracked teapot on it, and began rubbing off the molasses from the baby's face and hands, and, having polished her till she shone, she set her down in Tom's lap, while she busied herself in clearing away supper. The baby employed the intervals in pulling Tom's nose, scratching his face, and burying her fat hands in his woolly hair, which last operation seemed to afford her special content. "Ain't she a pert young un?" said Tom, holding her from him to take a full-length view, then, getting up, he set her on his broad shoulder, and began capering and dancing with her, while Moss or George snapped at her with his pocket handkerchief, and Mose and Pete, now returned again, roared after her like bears, till Aunt Chloe declared that they fairly took her head off with their noise. As, according to her own statement, this surgical operation was a matter of daily occurrence in the cabin, the declaration no whit abetted the merriment, till every one had roared and tumbled and danced themselves down to a state of composure. Well, now, I hopes you're done, said Aunt Chloe, who had been busy in pulling out a rude box of a trundle bed, and now, you Mose and you Pete, get into thar, for we's goin' to have the meetin'. Oh mother, we don't want to. We wants to sit up to meetin's is so curries. We likes em. La, Aunt Chloe, shove it under, and let em sit up, said Moss R. George, decisively, giving a push to the rude machine. Aunt Chloe, having thus saved appearances, seemed highly delighted to push the thing under, saying, as she did so, well, maybe tea will do em some good. The House now resolved itself into a committee of the whole, to consider the accommodations and arrangements for the meeting. What we's to do for cheers, now, I declare I don't know, said Aunt Chloe. As the meeting had been held at Uncle Tom's weekly, for an indefinite length of time, without any more cheers, there seemed some encouragement to hope that a way would be discovered at present. Old Uncle Peter sung both the legs out of Dad's oldest cheer, last week, suggested Mose. You go long. I'll bound you pulled em out, some o' your shines, said Aunt Chloe. Well, it'll stand, if it only keeps jam up agin the wall, said Mose. Den Uncle Peter muse and he sit in it, cause he allies hitches when he gets a singing. He hitched pretty nigh across the room, other night, said Pete. Good Lord, get him in it, then, said Mose, and den he'd begin, come saints and sinners, hear me tell, and den down he'd go, and Mose imitated precisely the nasal tones of the old man, tumbling on the floor, to illustrate the supposed catastrophe. Come now, be decent, can't yet, said Aunt Chloe, and you're shame. Moss R. George, however, joined the offender in the laugh, and declared decidedly that Mose was a buster. So the maternal admonition seemed rather to fail of effect. Well, old man, said Aunt Chloe, you'll have to tote in them AR bar LS. Mother's bar LS is like Dad AR Winters, Moss R. George was reading about, in the good book Day Never Fails, said Mose, aside to Pete. I'm sure one on em caved in last week, said Pete, and let em all down in the middle of the singing. Dad AR was failing, warned it. During this aside between Mose and Pete, 2 empty casks had been rolled into the cabin, and being secured from rolling, by stones on each side, boards were laid across them, which arrangement, together with the turning down of certain tubs and pails, and the disposing of the rickety chairs, at last completed the preparation. Moss R. George is such a beautiful reader, now, I know he'll stay to read for us, said Aunt Chloe, pears like tea will be so much more interested. George very readily consented, for your boy is always ready for anything that makes him of importance. The room was soon filled with a motley assemblage, from the old gray-headed patriarch of 80, to the young girl and lad of 15. A little harmless gossip ensued on various themes, such as where old Aunt Sally got her new red handkerchief, and how Mrs. was a-going to give Lizzie that spotted muslin gown, when she'd got her new barrage made up, and how Moss R. Shelby was thinking of buying a new sorrel colt, that was going to prove an addition to the glories of the place. A few of the worshippers belonged to families hard by, who had got permission to attend, and who brought in various choice scraps of information, about the sayings and doings at the house and on the place, which circulated as freely as the same sort of small change does in higher circles. After a while the singing commenced, to the evident delight of all present. Not even all the disadvantage of nasal intonation could prevent the effect of the naturally fine voices, in airs at once wild and spirited. The words were sometimes the well-known and common hymns sung in the churches about, and sometimes of a wilder, more indefinite character, picked up at camp meetings. The chorus of one of them, which ran as follows, was sung with great energy and unction. Die on the field of battle. Die on the field of battle. Glory in my soul. Another special favorite had oft repeated the words. Oh, I'm going to glory, won't you come along with me? Don't you see the angels beckoning, and a-calling me away? Don't you see the golden city and the everlasting day? There were others, which made incessant mention of Jordan's banks, and Canaan's fields, and the New Jerusalem, for the Negro mind, impassioned and imaginative, always attaches itself to hymns and expressions of a vivid and pictorial nature, and, as they sung, some laughed, and some cried, and some clapped hands, or shook hands rejoicingly with each other, as if they had fairly gained the other side of the river. Various exhortations, or relations of experience, followed, and intermingled with the singing. One old gray-headed woman, long past work, but much revered as a sort of chronicle of the past, rose, and leaning on her staff, said, "Well, children, well, I'm mighty glad to hear ye all and see ye all once more, 'cause I don't know when I'll be gone to glory, but I've done got ready, children, 'pears like I'd got my little bundle all tied up, and my bonnet on, jest a-waitin' for the stage to come along and take me home. Sometimes, in the night, I think I hear the wheels a-rattlin', and I'm lookin' out all the time. Now, you jest be ready too, for I tell ye all, children," she said, striking her staff hard on the floor, "dat our glory is a mighty thing. It's a mighty thing, children, you don't know nothing about it, it's wonderful." And the old creature sat down, with streaming tears, as wholly overcome, while the whole circle struck up, "O Canaan, bright Canaan, I'm bound for the land of Canaan." Moss R. George, by request, read the last chapters of Revelation, often interrupted by such exclamations as the sakes now. Only hear that. Jest think on t. Is all that a comin' sure enough. George, who was a bright boy, and well trained in religious things by his mother, finding himself an object of general admiration, threw in expositions of his own, from time to time, with a commendable seriousness and gravity, for which he was admired by the young and blessed by the old, and it was agreed, on all hands, that a minister couldn't lay it off better than he did, that he was really amazing. Uncle Tom was a sort of patriarch in religious matters, in the neighborhood. Having, naturally, an organization in which the morale was strongly predominant, together with a greater breadth and cultivation of mind than obtained among his companions, he was looked up to with great respect, as a sort of minister among them, and the simple, hearty, sincere style of his exhortations might have edified even better educated persons. But it was in prayer that he especially excelled. Nothing could exceed the touching simplicity, the childlike earnestness, of his prayer, enriched with the language of Scripture, which seemed so entirely to have wrought itself into his being, as to have become a part of himself, and to drop from his lips unconsciously, in the language of a pious old Negro. He prayed right up. And so much did his prayer always work on the devotional feelings of his audiences, that there seemed often a danger that it would be lost altogether in the abundance of the responses which broke out everywhere around him. While this scene was passing in the cabin of the man, one quite otherwise passed in the halls of the master. The trader and Mr. Shelby were seated together in the dining room aforenamed, at a table covered with papers and writing utensils. Mr. Shelby was busy in counting some bundles of bills, which, as they were counted, he pushed over to the trader, who counted them likewise. "All fair," said the trader, "and now for signing these here." Mr. Shelby hastily drew the bills of sale towards him, and signed them, like a man that hurries over some disagreeable business, and then pushed them over with the money. Haley produced, from a well-worn valise, a parchment, which, after looking over it a moment, he handed to Mr. Shelby, who took it with a gesture of suppressed eagerness. "Wall, now, the thing's done," said the trader, getting up. "It's done," said Mr. Shelby, in a musing tone, and, fetching a long breath, he repeated, "It's done." "Yer don't seem to feel much pleased with it, 'pears to me," said the trader. "Haley," said Mr. Shelby, "I hope you'll remember that you promised, on your honor, you wouldn't sell Tom, without knowing what sort of hands he's going into." "Why, you've just done it, sir," said the trader. "Circumstances, you well know, obliged me," said Shelby, haughtily. "Wall, you know, they may oblige me, too," said the trader. "Howsoever, I'll do the very best I can in getting Tom a good bird. As to my treating on him bad, you needn't be a grain of fear. If there's anything that I thank the Lord for, it is that I'm never no ways cruel." After the expositions which the trader had previously given of his humane principles, Mr. Shelby did not feel particularly reassured by these declarations, but, as they were the best comfort the case admitted of, he allowed the trader to depart in silence, and betook himself to a solitary cigar. Chapter B. Showing the feelings of living property on changing owners. Mr. and Mrs. Shelby had retired to their apartment for the night. He was lounging in a large easy chair, looking over some letters that had come in the afternoon mail, and she was standing before her mirror, brushing out the complicated braids and curls in which Eliza had arranged her hair, for, noticing her pale cheeks and haggard eyes, she had excused her attendance that night, and ordered her to bed. The employment, naturally enough, suggested her conversation with the girl in the morning, and turning to her husband, she said, carelessly, "By the by, Arthur, who was that low-bred fellow that you lugged into our dinner table today?" "Haley is his name," said Shelby, turning himself rather uneasily in his chair, and continuing with his eyes fixed on a letter. "Haley? Who is he, and what may be his business here, pray?" "Well, he's a man that I transacted some business with, last time I was at Natchez," said Mr. Shelby. "And he presumes on it to make himself quite at home, and call and dine here. Why, I invited him, I had some accounts with him," said Shelby. "Is he a Negro trader?" said Mrs. Shelby, noticing a certain embarrassment in her husband's manner. "Why, my dear, what put that into your head?" said Shelby, looking up. "Nothing, only Eliza came in here, after dinner, in a great worry, crying and taking on, and said you were talking with the trader, and that she heard him make an offer for her boy, the ridiculous little goose." "She did, hey?" said Mr. Shelby, returning to his paper, which he seemed for a few moments quite intent upon, not perceiving that he was holding it bottom upwards. "It will have to come out," said he, mentally, "as well now as ever." "I told Eliza," said Mrs. Shelby, as she continued brushing her hair, "that she was a little fool for her pains, and that you never had anything to do with that sort of persons. Of course, I knew you never meant to sell any of our people, least of all, to such a fellow." "Well, Emily," said her husband, "so I have always felt and said, but the fact is that my business lies so that I cannot get on without. I shall have to sell some of my hands." "To that creature? Impossible." "Mr. Shelby, you cannot be serious." "I'm sorry to say that I am," said Mr. Shelby. "I've agreed to sell Tom." "What, our Tom, that good, faithful creature, been your faithful servant from a boy?" "Oh, Mr. Shelby, and you have promised him his freedom, to you, and I have spoken to him 100 times of it." "Well, I can believe anything now. I can believe now that you could sell little Harry, poor Eliza's only child," said Mrs. Shelby, in a tone between grief and indignation. "Well, since you must know all, it is so. I have agreed to sell Tom and Harry both, and I don't know why I am to be rated, as if I were a monster, for doing what everyone does every day. But why, of all others, choose these," said Mrs. Shelby. "Why sell them, of all on the place, if you must sell at all?" "Because they will bring the highest sum of any, that's what." "I could choose another, if you say so." "The fellow made me a high bid on Eliza, if that would suit you any better," said Mr. Shelby. "The wretch," said Mrs. Shelby, vehemently. "Well, I didn't listen to it, a moment out of regard to your feelings, I wouldn't, so give me some credit." "My dear," said Mrs. Shelby, recollecting herself, "forgive me. I have been hasty. I was surprised, and entirely unprepared for this, but surely you will allow me to intercede for these poor creatures." Tom is a noble-hearted, faithful fellow, if he is black. I do believe, Mr. Shelby, that if he were put to it, he would lay down his life for you. I know it, I dare say, but what's the use of all this? I can't help myself. Why not make a pecuniary sacrifice? I'm willing to bear my part of the inconvenience. Oh, Mr. Shelby, I have tried most faithfully, as a Christian woman should, to do my duty to these poor, simple, dependent creatures. I have cared for them, instructed them, watched over them, and known all their little cares and joys, for years, and how can I ever hold up my head again among them, if, for the sake of a little paltry gain, we sell such a faithful, excellent, confiding creature as poor Tom, and tear from him in a moment all we have taught him to love and value? I have taught them the duties of the family, of parent and child, and husband and wife, and how can I bear to have this open acknowledgement that we care for no tie, no duty, no relation, however sacred, compared with money? I have talked with Eliza about her boy, her duty to him as a Christian mother, to watch over him, pray for him, and bring him up in a Christian way, and now what can I say, if you tear him away, and sell him, soul and body, to a profane, unprincipled man, just to save a little money? I have told her that one soul is worth more than all the money in the world, and how will she believe me when she sees us turn round and sell her child, sell him, perhaps, to certain ruin of body and soul? I'm sorry you feel so about it, Emily. Indeed I am, said Mr. Shelby, and I respect your feelings, too, though I don't pretend to share them to their full extent, but I tell you now, solemnly, it's of no use, I can't help myself. I didn't mean to tell you this, Emily, but, in plain words, there is no choice between selling these two and selling everything. Either they must go, or all must. Haley has come into possession of a mortgage, which, if I don't clear off with him directly, will take everything before it. I've raked, and scraped, and borrowed, and all but begged, and the price of these two was needed to make up the balance, and I had to give them up. Haley fancied the child, he agreed to settle the matter that way, and no other. I was in his power, and had to do it. If you feel so to have them sold, would it be any better to have all sold? Mrs. Shelby stood like one stricken. Finally, turning to her toilet, she rested her face in her hands, and gave a sort of groan. This is God's curse on slavery, a bitter, bitter, most accursed thing, a curse to the master and a curse to the slave. I was a fool to think I could make anything good out of such a deadly evil. It is a sin to hold a slave under laws like ours. I always felt it was. I always thought so when I was a girl. I thought so still more after I joined the church, but I thought I could gild it over. I thought, by kindness, and care, and instruction, I could make the condition of mine better than freedom. Fool that I was. Why, you are getting to be an abolitionist, quite. Abolitionist, if they knew all I know about slavery, they might talk. We don't need them to tell us. You know, I never thought that slavery was right, never felt willing to own slaves. Well, therein you differ from many wise and pious men, said Mr. Shelby. You remember Mr. B.'s sermon, the other Sunday? I don't want to hear such sermons. I never wish to hear Mr. B. in our church again. Ministers can't help the evil, perhaps can't cure it, any more than we can but defend it. It always went against my common sense. And I think you didn't think much of that sermon, either. Well, said Shelby, I must say these ministers sometimes carry matters further than we poor sinners would exactly dare to do. We men of the world must wink pretty hard at various things, and get used to a deal that isn't the exact thing. But we don't quite fancy, when women and ministers come out broad and square, and go beyond us in matters of either modesty or morals, that's a fact. But now, my dear, I trust you see the necessity of the thing, and you see that I have done the very best that circumstances would allow. Oh yes, said Mrs. Shelby, hurriedly and abstractedly fingering her gold watch. "I haven't any jewelry of any amount," she added, thoughtfully, "but would not this watch do something? It was an expensive one, when it was bought. If I could only at least save Eliza's child, I would sacrifice anything I have." "I'm sorry, very sorry, Emily," said Mr. Shelby. "I'm sorry this takes hold of you so, but it will do no good. The fact is, Emily, the thing's done, the bills of sale are already signed, and in Haley's hands, and you must be thankful it is no worse. That man has had it in his power to ruin us all, and now he is fairly off. If you knew the man as I do, you'd think that we had had a narrow escape. Is he so hard, then? Why, not a cruel man, exactly, but a man of leather, a man alive to nothing but trade and profit, cool, and unhesitating, and unrelenting, as death and the grave. He'd sell his own mother at a good percentage, not wishing the old woman any harm, either. And this wretch owns that good, faithful Tom, and Eliza's child. Well, my dear, the fact is that this goes rather hard with me. It's a thing I hate to think of. Haley wants to drive matters, and take possession tomorrow. I'm going to get out my horse bright and early, and be off. I can't see Tom, that's a fact, and you had better arrange a drive somewhere, and carry Eliza off. Let the thing be done when she is out of sight." "No, no," said Mrs. Shelby, "I'll be in no sense accomplice or help in this cruel business. I'll go and see poor old Tom, God help him, in his distress. They shall see, at any rate, that their mistress can feel for and with them. As to Eliza, I dare not think about it. The Lord forgive us. What have we done, that this cruel necessity should come on us?" There was one listener to this conversation whom Mr. and Mrs. Shelby little suspected. Communicating with their apartment was a large closet, opening by a door into the outer passage. When Mrs. Shelby had dismissed Eliza for the night, her feverish and excited mind had suggested the idea of this closet, and she had hidden herself there, and, with her ear pressed close against the crack of the door, had lost not a word of the conversation. When the voices died into silence, she rose and crept stealthily away. Pale, shivering, with rigid features and compressed lips, she looked an entirely altered being from the soft and timid creature she had been hitherto. She moved cautiously along the entry, paused one moment at her mistress' door, and raised her hands in mute appeal to heaven, and then turned and glided into her own room. It was a quiet, neat apartment, on the same floor with her mistress. There was the pleasant sunny window, where she had often sat singing at her sewing, there a little case of books, and various little fancy articles, ranged by them, the gifts of Christmas holidays. There was her simple wardrobe in the closet and in the drawers. Here was, in short, her home, and, on the whole, a happy one it had been to her. But there, on the bed, lay her slumbering boy, his long curls falling negligently around his unconscious face, his rosy mouth half open, his little fat hands thrown out over the bedclothes, and a smile spread like a sunbeam over his whole face. "Poor boy, poor fellow," said Eliza, "they have sold you, but your mother will save you yet." No tear dropped over that pillow. In such straits as these, the heart has no tears to give, it drops only blood, bleeding itself away in silence. She took a piece of paper and a pencil, and wrote, hastily, "Oh, Mrs., dear Mrs., don't think me ungrateful, don't think hard of me, anyway I heard all you and master said tonight. I am going to try to save my boy, you will not blame me. God bless and reward you for all your kindness." Hastily folding and directing this, she went to a drawer and made up a little package of clothing for her boy, which she tied with a handkerchief firmly round her waist, and, so fond is a mother's remembrance, that, even in the terrors of that hour, she did not forget to put in the little package one or two of his favorite toys, reserving a gaily painted parrot to amuse him, when she should be called on to awaken him. It was some trouble to arouse the little sleeper, but, after some effort, he sat up, and was playing with his bird, while his mother was putting on her bonnet and shawl. "Where are you going, mother?" said he, as she drew near the bed, with his little coat and cap. His mother drew near, and looked so earnestly into his eyes, that he at once divined that something unusual was the matter. "Hush, Harry," she said, "mustn't speak loud, or they will hear us." A wicked man was coming to take little Harry away from his mother, and carry him way off in the dark, but mother won't let him. She's going to put on her little boy's cap and coat, and run off with him, so the ugly man can't catch him. Saying these words, she had tied and buttoned on the child's simple outfit, and, taking him in her arms, she whispered to him to be very still, and, opening a door in her room which led into the outer veranda, she glided noiselessly out. It was a sparkling, frosty, starlight night, and the mother wrapped the shawl close round her child, as, perfectly quiet with vague terror, he clung round her neck. Old Bruno, a great Newfoundland, who slept at the end of the porch, rose, with a low growl, as she came near. She gently spoke his name, and the animal, an old pet and playmate of hers, instantly, wagging his tail, prepared to follow her, though apparently revolving much, in his simple dog's head, what such an indiscreet midnight promenade might mean. Some dim ideas of imprudence or impropriety in the measure seemed to embarrass him considerably, for he often stopped, as Eliza glided forward, and looked wistfully, first at her and then at the house, and then, as if reassured by reflection, he pattered along after her again. A few minutes brought them to the window of Uncle Tom's cottage, and Eliza, stopping, tapped lightly on the window pane. The prayer meeting at Uncle Tom's had, in the order of hymn singing, been protracted to a very late hour, and, as Uncle Tom had indulged himself in a few lengthy solos afterwards, the consequence was, that, although it was now between 12 and 1 o'clock, he and his worthy helpmeet were not yet asleep. "Good Lord, what's that?" said Aunt Chloe, starting up and hastily drawing the curtain. "My sakes alive, if it ain't Lizzie! Get on your clothes, old man, quick, there's old Bruno, too, a pawin' round, what on earth? I'm blind to open the door." And suiting the action to the word, the door flew open, and the light of the tallow candle, which Tom had hastily lighted, fell on the haggard face and dark, wild eyes of the fugitive. "Lord bless you, I'm scared to look at ye, Lizzie. Are ye tuck sick, or what's come over ye?" "I'm running away, Uncle Tom and Aunt Chloe carrying off my child. Master sold him." Eliza comes to tell Uncle Tom that he is sold, and that she is running away to save her child. "Sold him," echoed both, lifting up their hands in dismay. "Yes, sold him," said Eliza, firmly. "I crept into the closet by mistress' door tonight, and I heard Master tell Mrs. that he had sold my Harry, and you, Uncle Tom, both, to a trader, and that he was going off this morning on his horse, and that the man was to take possession today." Tom had stood, during this speech, with his hands raised, and his eyes dilated, like a man in a dream. Slowly and gradually, as its meaning came over him, he collapsed, rather than seated himself, on his old chair, and sunk his head down upon his knees. "The good Lord have pity on us," said Aunt Chloe. "Oh, it don't seem as if it was true. What has he done, that Moss R should sell him? He hasn't done anything, it isn't for that. Master don't want to sell, and Mrs. she's always good. I heard her plead and beg for us, but he told her tea was no use, that he was in this man's debt, and that this man had got the power over him, and that if he didn't pay him off clear, it would end in his having to sell the place and all the people, and move off. Yes, I heard him say there was no choice between selling these two and selling all, the man was driving him so hard. Master said he was sorry, but oh, Mrs. you ought to have heard her talk. If she ain't a Christian and an angel, there never was one. I'm a wicked girl to leave her so, but, then, I can't help it. She said, herself, one soul was worth more than the world, and this boy has a soul, and if I let him be carried off, who knows what'll become of it. It must be right. but, if it ain't right, the Lord forgive me, for I can't help doing it. Well, old man, said Aunt Chloe, why don't you go, too? Will you wait to be toted down river, where they kill niggers with hard work and starving? I'd a heap rather die than go there, any day. There's time for ye be off with Lizzie, you've got a pass to come and go any time. Come, bustle up, and I'll get your things together. Tom slowly raised his head, and looked sorrowfully but quietly around, and said, No, I ain't going. Let Eliza go, it's her right. I wouldn't be the one to say no tanti in natura for her to stay, but you heard what she said. If I must be sold, or all the people on the place, and everything go to rack, why, let me be sold. I suppose I can be ar as well as any on em, he added, while something like a sob and a sigh shook his broad, rough chest convulsively. Moss are always found me on the spot, he always will. I never have broke trust, nor used my pass no ways contrary to my word, and I never will. It's better for me alone to go, than to break up the place and sell all. Moss are and to blame, Chloe, and he'll take care of you and the poor. Here he turned to the rough trundle bed full of little woolly heads, and broke fairly down. He leaned over the back of the chair, and covered his face with his large hands. Sobs, heavy, hoarse and loud, shook the chair, and great tears fell through his fingers on the floor, just such tears, sir, as you dropped into the coffin where lay your firstborn son, such tears, woman, as you shed when you heard the cries of your dying babe. For, sir, he was a man and you are but another man. And, woman, though dressed in silk and jewels, you are but a woman, and, in life's great straits and mighty griefs, ye feel but one sorrow. And now, said Eliza, as she stood in the door, I saw my husband only this afternoon, and I little knew then what was to come. They have pushed him to the very last standing place, and he told me, today, that he was going to run away. Do try, if you can, to get word to him. Tell him how I went, and why I went, and tell him I'm going to try and find Canada. You must give my love to him, and tell him, if I never see him again. She turned away, and stood with her back to them for a moment, and then added, in a husky voice, tell him to be as good as he can, and try and meet me in the kingdom of heaven. Call Bruno in there, she added. Shut the door on him, poor beast. He mustn't go with me. A few last words and tears, a few simple adieus and blessings, and clasping her wondering and affrighted child in her arms, she glided noiselessly away. Chapter 6. Discovery. Mr. and Mrs. Shelby, after their protracted discussion of the night before, did not readily sink to repose, and, in consequence, slept somewhat later than usual, the ensuing morning. I wonder what keeps Eliza, said Mrs. Shelby, after giving her bell repeated pulls, to no purpose. Mr. Shelby was standing before his dressing glass, sharpening his razor, and just then the door opened, and a colored boy entered, with his shaving water. Andy, said his mistress, step to Eliza's door, and tell her I have rung for her 3 times. Poor thing, she added, to herself, with a sigh. Andy soon returned, with eyes very wide in astonishment. Lord, Mrs. Lizzie's drawers is all open, and her things all lying every which way, and I believe she's just done cleared out. The truth flashed upon Mr. Shelby and his wife at the same moment. He exclaimed. Then she suspected it, and she's off. The Lord be thanked, said Mrs. Shelby. I trust she is. Wife, you talk like a fool. Really, it will be something pretty awkward for me, if she is. Haley saw that I hesitated about selling this child, and he'll think I connived at it, to get him out of the way. It touches my honor. And Mr. Shelby left the room hastily. There was great running and ejaculating, and opening and shutting of doors, and appearance of faces in all shades of color in different places, for about a quarter of an hour. One person only, who might have shed some light on the matter, was entirely silent, and that was the head cook, Aunt Chloe. Silently, and with a heavy cloud settled down over her once joyous face, she proceeded making out her breakfast biscuits, as if she heard and saw nothing of the excitement around her. Very soon, about a dozen young imps were roosting, like so many crows, on the veranda railings, each one determined to be the first one to apprise the strange Moshar of his ill luck. "He'll be rail mad, I'll be bound," said Andy. "Won't he swore," said Little Black Jay. "Yes, for he does swore," said woolly-headed Mandy. "I hearn him yesterday, at dinner. I hearn all about it then, 'cause I got into the closet where Mrs. keeps the great jugs, and I hearn every word." And Mandy, who had never in her life thought of the meaning of a word she had heard, more than a black cat, now took airs of superior wisdom, and strutted about, forgetting to state that, though actually coiled up among the jugs at the time specified, she had been fast asleep all the time. When, at last, Haley appeared, booted and spurred, he was saluted with the bad tidings on every hand. The young imps on the veranda were not disappointed in their hope of hearing him swore, which he did with a fluency and fervency which delighted them all amazingly, as they ducked and dodged hither and thither, to be out of the reach of his riding whip, and, all whooping off together, they tumbled, in a pile of immeasurable giggle, on the withered turf under the veranda, where they kicked up their heels and shouted to their full satisfaction. "If I had the little devils," muttered Haley, between his teeth. "But you haven't got them, though," said Andy, with a triumphant flourish, and making a string of indescribable mouths at the unfortunate trader's back, when he was fairly beyond hearing. "I say now, Shelby, this here's a most extraordinary business," said Haley, as he abruptly entered the parlor. "It seems that gal's off, with her young un." "Mr. Haley, Mrs. Shelby is present," said Mr. Shelby. "I beg pardon, ma'am," said Haley, bowing slightly, with a still lowering brow, "but still I say, as I said before, this here's a sing'lar report." "Is it true, sir?" "Sir," said Mr. Shelby, "if you wish to communicate with me, you must observe something of the decorum of a gentleman. Andy, take Mr. Haley's hat and riding whip. Take a seat, sir." "Yes, sir, I regret to say that the young woman, excited by overhearing, or having reported to her, something of this business, has taken her child in the night, and made off. I did expect fair dealing in this matter, I confess," said Haley. "Well, sir," said Mr. Shelby, turning sharply round upon him, "what am I to understand by that remark? If any man calls my honor in question, I have but one answer for him." The trader cowered at this, and in a somewhat lower tone said that it was plaguey hard on a fellow, that had made a fair bargain, to be gulled that way. "Mr. Haley," said Mr. Shelby, "if I did not think you had some cause for disappointment, I should not have borne from you the rude and unceremonious style of your entrance into my parlor this morning. I say thus much, however, since appearances call for it, that I shall allow of no insinuations cast upon me, as if I were at all partner to any unfairness in this matter. Moreover, I shall feel bound to give you every assistance, in the use of horses, servants, and in the recovery of your property. So, in short, Haley," said he, suddenly dropping from the tone of dignified coolness to his ordinary one of easy frankness, "the best way for you is to keep good-natured and eat some breakfast, and we will then see what is to be done." Mrs. Shelby now rose, and said her engagements would prevent her being at the breakfast table that morning, and, deputing a very respectable mulatto woman to attend to the gentleman's coffee at the sideboard, she left the room. "Old lady don't like your humble servant, over and above," said Haley, with an uneasy effort to be very familiar. "I am not accustomed to hear my wife spoken of with such freedom," said Mr. Shelby, dryly. "Beg pardon, of course, only a joke, you know," said Haley, forcing a laugh. "Some jokes are less agreeable than others," rejoined Shelby. Devilish free, now I've signed those papers, cuss him, muttered Haley to himself, quite grand, since yesterday. Never did fall of any prime minister at court occasion wider surges of sensation than the report of Tom's fate among his compeers on the place. It was the topic in every mouth, everywhere, and nothing was done in the house or in the field, but to discuss its probable results. Eliza's flight, an unprecedented event on the place, was also a great accessory in stimulating the general excitement. Black Sam, as he was commonly called, from his being about 3 shades blacker than any other son of ebony on the place, was revolving the matter profoundly in all its phases and bearings, with a comprehensiveness of vision and a strict lookout to his own personal well-being, that would have done credit to any white patriot in Washington. "It's an ill wind dat blow no war dat are a fact," said Sam, sententiously, giving an additional hoist to his pantaloons, and adroitly substituting a long nail in place of a missing suspender button, with which effort of mechanical genius he seemed highly delighted. "Yes, it's an ill wind blows no war," he repeated. "Now, dar, Tom's down wall, course there's room for some nigger to be up, and why not this nigger, that's steady day. Tom, a ridin' round the country, boots black pass in his pocket, all grand as cuffy, but who he? Now, why shouldn't Sam, that's what I want to know." "Halloo, Sam, oh Sam. Moss R wants you to catch Bill and Jerry," said Andy, cutting short Sam's soliloquy. "Hi, what's afoot now, young un? Why, you don't know, I suppose, that Lizzie's cut stick, and cleared out, with her young un." "You teach your granny," said Sam, with infinite contempt, "knowed it a heap sight sooner than you did, this nigger and so green, now. Well, anyhow, Moss R wants Bill and Jerry geared right up, and you and I to go with Moss R Haley, to look arter her." "Good, now, that's the time o' day," said Sam. "It's Sam that's called for in these here times. He's the nigger. See if I don't catch her, now, Moss R'll see what Sam can do." But, Sam," said Andy, "you'd better think twice, for Mrs. don't want her cotched, and she'll be in your wool." "Hi," said Sam, opening his eyes. "How you know dat?" "Heard her say so, my own self, dis blessed mornin', when I bring in Moss R's shaving water. She sent me to see why Lizzie didn't come to dress her, and when I tellied her she was off, she jest ris up, and ses she, the Lord be praised, and Moss R, he seemed rail mad, and ses he, wife, you talk like a fool. But Lord, she'll bring him to. I knows well enough how that'll be, it's allers best to stand Mrs. side the fence, now I tell yer." Black Sam, upon this, scratched his woolly pate, which, if it did not contain very profound wisdom, still contained a great deal of a particular species much in demand among politicians of all complexions and countries, and vulgarly denominated knowing which side the bread is buttered. So, stopping with grave consideration, he again gave a hitch to his pantaloons, which was his regularly organized method of assisting his mental perplexities. "Der ain't no saying never 'bout no kind o' thing in dis here world," he said, at last. Sam spoke like a philosopher, emphasizing this as if he had had a large experience in different sorts of worlds, and therefore had come to his conclusions advisedly. "Now, Sartin Ida said that Mrs. would a scoured the varsal world after Lizzie," added Sam, thoughtfully. "So she would," said Andy, "but can't ye see through a ladder, ye black nigger? Mrs. don't want dis yer Moss or Haley to get Lizzie's boy, that's to go." "Hi," said Sam, with an indescribable intonation, known only to those who have heard it among the Negroes. "And I'll tell yer more and all," said Andy, "I specs you'd better be making tracks for dem hosses mighty sudden, too, for I hearn Mrs. clearin' arter yer, so you've stood full and long enough." Sam, upon this, began to bestir himself in real earnest, and after a while appeared, bearing down gloriously towards the house, with Bill and Jerry in a full canter, and adroitly throwing himself off before they had any idea of stopping, he brought them up alongside of the horse post like a tornado. Haley's horse, which was a skittish young colt, winced, and bounced, and pulled hard at his halter. "Ho, ho," said Sam, scary, "Ar yeah," and his black visage lighted up with a curious, mischievous gleam. "I'll fix ya now," said he. There was a large beech tree overshadowing the place, and the small, sharp, triangular beech nuts lay scattered thickly on the ground. With one of these in his fingers, Sam approached the colt, stroked and patted, and seemed apparently busy in soothing his agitation. On pretense of adjusting the saddle, he adroitly slipped under it the sharp little nut, in such a manner that the least weight brought upon the saddle would annoy the nervous sensibilities of the animal, without leaving any perceptible graze or wound. "Dar," he said, rolling his eyes with an approving grin, "me fix em." At this moment Mrs. Shelby appeared on the balcony, beckoning to him. Sam approached with as good a determination to pay court as did ever suitor after a vacant place at St. James or Washington. "Why have you been loitering so, Sam?" "I sent Andy to tell you to hurry." "Lord bless you, Mrs., said Sam, "horses won't be cotched all in a minute, they done cleared out way down to the south pasture, and the Lord knows war." "Sam, how often must I tell you not to say Lord bless you, and the Lord knows, and such things? It's wicked." "Oh, Lord bless my soul. I done forgot, Mrs. I won't say nothing of the sort no more." "Why, Sam, you just have said it again." "Did I? Oh, Lord. I mean I didn't go for to say it." "You must be careful, Sam. Just let me get my breath, Mrs., and I'll start fair." "I'll be very careful." "Well, Sam, you are to go with Mr. Haley, to show him the road, and help him. Be careful of the horses, Sam, you know Jerry was a little lame last week, don't ride them too fast." Mrs. Shelby spoke the last words with a low voice, and strong emphasis. "Let this child alone for Dad," said Sam, rolling up his eyes with a volume of meaning. "Lord knows." "Ha! Didn't say Dad," said he, suddenly catching his breath, with a ludicrous flourish of apprehension, which made his mistress laugh, spite of herself. "Yes, Mrs., I'll look out for the hosses." "Now, Andy," said Sam, returning to his stand under the beech trees, "you see I wouldn't be all surprised if Dad our gentleman's critter should give a fling, by and by, when he comes to be a gettin' up. You know, Andy, critters they will do such things," and therewith Sam poked Andy in the side, in a highly suggestive manner. "Hi," said Andy, with an air of instant appreciation. "Yes, you see, Andy, Mrs. wants to make time Dad ar's clar to der most ordinary observer. I just make a little for her. Now, you see, get all these your hosses loose, caperin' permiscus round this your lot and down to the wood dar, and I spec Moss won't be off in a hurry." Andy grinned. "Yer see," said Sam, "yer see, Andy, if any such thing should happen as that Moss Haley's horse should begin to act contrary, and cut up, you and I just let's go of our end to help him, and we'll help him, oh yes." And Sam and Andy laid their heads back on their shoulders, and broke into a low, immoderate laugh, snapping their fingers and flourishing their heels with exquisite delight. At this instant, Haley appeared on the veranda. Somewhat mollified by certain cups of very good coffee, he came out smiling and talking, in tolerably restored humor. Sam and Andy, clawing for certain fragmentary palm leaves, which they were in the habit of considering as hats, flew to the horse posts, to be ready to help Moss Sam's palm leaf had been ingeniously disentangled from all pretensions to braid, as respects its brim, and the slivers starting apart, and standing upright, gave it a blazing air of freedom and defiance, quite equal to that of any Fiji chief, while the whole brim of Andy's being departed bodily, he rapped the crown on his head with a dexterous thump, and looked about well pleased, as if to say, "Who says I haven't got a hat?" "Well, boys," said Haley, "look alive now, we must lose no time." Not a bit of him, Moss R, said Sam, putting Haley's rein in his hand, and holding his stirrup, while Andy was untying the other two horses. The instant Haley touched the saddle, the mettlesome creature bounded from the earth with a sudden spring, that threw his master sprawling, some feet off, on the soft, dry turf. Sam, with frantic ejaculations, made a dive at the reins, but only succeeded in brushing the blazing palm leaf aforenamed into the horse's eyes, which by no means tended to allay the confusion of his nerves. So, with great vehemence, he overturned Sam, and, giving 2 or 3 contemptuous snorts, flourished his heels vigorously in the air, and was soon prancing away towards the lower end of the lawn, followed by Bill and Jerry, whom Andy had not failed to let loose, according to contract, speeding them off with various direful ejaculations. And now ensued a miscellaneous scene of confusion. Sam and Andy ran and shouted, dogs barked here and there, and Mike, Mose, Mandy, Fanny, and all the smaller specimens on the place, both male and female, raised, clapped hands, whooped, and shouted, with outrageous officiousness and untiring zeal. Haley's horse, which was a white one, and very fleet and spirited, appeared to enter into the spirit of the scene with great gusto, and having for his coursing ground a lawn of nearly half a mile in extent, gently sloping down on every side into indefinite woodland, he appeared to take infinite delight in seeing how near he could allow his pursuers to approach him, and then, when within a hand's breadth, whisk off with a start and a snort, like a mischievous beast as he was, and career far down into some alley of the wood lot. Nothing was further from Sam's mind than to have any one of the troop taken until such season as should seem to him most befitting, and the exertions that he made were certainly most heroic. Like the sword of Coeur de Lion, which always blazed in the front and thickest of the battle, Sam's palm leaf was to be seen everywhere. When there was the least danger that a horse could be caught, there he would bear down full tilt, shouting, "Now for it, catch him, in a way that would set everything to indiscriminate rout in a moment." Haley ran up and down, and cursed and swore and stamped miscellaneously. Mr. Shelby in vain tried to shout directions from the balcony, and Mrs. Shelby from her chamber window alternately laughed and wondered not without some inkling of what lay at the bottom of all this confusion. At last, about 12 o'clock, Sam appeared triumphant, mounted on Jerry, with Haley's horse by his side, reeking with sweat, but with flashing eyes and dilated nostrils, showing that the spirit of freedom had not yet entirely subsided. "He's cotched," he exclaimed, triumphantly. "If 't hadn't been for me, they might have bust themselves, all on 'em, but I cotched him." "You," growled Haley, in no amiable mood. "If it hadn't been for you, this never would have happened." "Lord bless us, Moss R," said Sam, in a tone of the deepest concern, "and me that has been racin' and chasin' till the sweat jest owers off me." Well, said Haley, "you've lost me near 3 hours, with your cursed nonsense. Now let's be off, and have no more fooling." "Why, Moss R," said Sam, in a deprecating tone, "I believe you mean to kill us all, Clar, horses and all. Here we are all just ready to drop down, and the critters all in a reek of sweat. Why, Moss R won't think of startin' on now till arter dinner. Moss R.'s hoss wants rubbin' down, see how he splashed hisself, and Jerry limps too. Don't think Missus would be willin' to have us start this your way, no how. Lord bless you, Moss R, we can catch up, if we do stop." Lizzie never was no great of a walker. Mrs. Shelby, who, greatly to her amusement, had overheard this conversation from the veranda, now resolved to do her part. She came forward, and, courteously expressing her concern for Haley's accident, pressed him to stay to dinner, saying that the cook should bring it on the table immediately. Thus, all things considered, Haley, with rather an equivocal grace, proceeded to the parlor, while Sam, rolling his eyes after him with unutterable meaning, proceeded gravely with the horses to the stable yard. "Did yer see him, Andy, did yer see him?" said Sam, when he had got fairly beyond the shelter of the barn, and fastened the horse to a post. Oh, Lord, if it warn't he as good as a meetin', now, to see him a dancin' and kickin' and swearin' at us. Didn't I hear him? Swore away, old fellow, says I to myself, will yer have your hoss now, or wait till you catch him? Says I. Lord, Andy, I think I can see him now. And Sam and Andy leaned up against the barn and laughed to their heart's content. Yer oughter seen how mad he looked, when I brought the hoss up. Lord, he'd a killed me, if he dares to, and there I was a-standin' as innocent and as humble. Lord, I seed you, said Andy, "Ain't you an old hoss, Sam?" Rather specs I am, said Sam. Did yer see Mrs. Upstairs at the winder? I seed her Logan. I'm sure, I was racing so, I didn't see nothing, said Andy. Well, yer see, said Sam, proceeding gravely to wash down Haley's pony, I acquired what yer may call a habit of observation, Andy. It's a very important habit, Andy, and I commend yer to be cultivating it, now you're young. Hissed up that hind foot, Andy. Yer see, Andy, it's observation makes all the difference in niggers. Didn't I see which way the wind blew this yer mornin'? Didn't I see what Mrs. wanted, though she never let on? Dat AR's observation, Andy. I specs it's what you may call a faculty. Faculties is different in different peoples, but cultivation of them goes a great way. I guess if I hadn't helped your observation this mornin', yer wouldn't have seen your way so smart, said Andy. Andy, said Sam, you's a promisin' child, der ain't no manner o' doubt. I thinks lots of yer, Andy, and I don't feel no ways ashamed to take days from you. We won't tender overlook nobody, Andy, cause the smartest on us gets tripped up sometimes. And so, Andy, let's go up to the house now. I'll be bound Mrs. 'll give us an uncommon goodbye, this your time.